Mrs. Weasley woke them all the following Wednesday. After a quick half a dozen bacon sandwiches each, they pulled on their coats and Mrs. Weasley took a flower pot off the kitchen mantelpiece and peered inside. We're running low, Arthur. We're going to have to buy some more today. Ah, well, guests first. After you, Harry dear. She offered him the flower pot. Harry stared at them all, watching him. What am I supposed to do? He stammered. He's never travelled by Floo powder, said Ron suddenly. Sorry, Harry, I forgot. Never, said Mrs. Weasley. But how did you get to Diagon Alley to buy your school things last year? I went underground. Really, said Mr. Weasley eagerly. Were there excavators? How exactly? Not now, Arthur. Floo powder's a lot quicker, dear, but goodness me, if you've never used it before. He'll be all right, Mum. Harry, watch us first. He took a pinch of the glittering powder out of the flower pot, stepped up to the fire and threw the powder into the flames. With a roar, the fire turned emerald green and rose higher than Fred, who stepped into it, shouting, Diagon Alley, and vanished. You must speak clearly, dear, Mrs. Weasley told Harry, as George dipped a hand into the flower pot. And mind you get out of the right grate. The right what? Said Harry nervously as the fire roared and whipped George out of sight too. Well, there are an awful lot of wizard fires to choose from, you know, but as long as you've spoken clearly, he'll be fine, Molly, don't fuss, said Mr. Weasley, helping himself to some Floo powder. But dear, if he gets lost, how would we ever explain it to his aunt and uncle? They wouldn't even notice, Harry reassured them. Dudley would just think it's a brilliant joke if I got lost up a chimney. Don't you worry about that. Well, all right. You go after Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley. Now, when you get to the fire, you say where you're going, and keep your elbows tucked in, and your eyes shut. The soot. Don't fidget, said Ron, or you might well fall out of the wrong fireplace. But don't panic and get out too early. Wait until you see Fred and George. Trying hard to bear all this in mind, Harry took a pinch of Floo powder and walked to the edge of the fire. He took a deep breath, scattered the powder into the flames, and stepped forward. The fire felt like a warm breeze, and he opened his mouth and immediately swallowed a lot of hot ash. Diagon Alley, he coughed. It felt as though he'd been sucked down a giant plug hole. He seemed to be spinning very fast. The roaring in his ears was deafening. He tried to keep his eyes open, but the whirl of green flames made him feel sick. Something hard knocked his elbow, and he tucked it in tightly, still spinning and spinning. Now it felt as though cold hands were slapping him in the face. Squinting through his glasses, he saw a blurred stream of fireplaces and catch glimpses of rooms beyond. His bacon sandwiches were churning inside him, and he closed his eyes, wishing it would stop. And then, suddenly, he fell face forward onto cold stone and felt his glasses shatter. Dizzy and bruised, covered in soot, he got gingerly to his feet, holding his broken glasses up to his eyes. He was quite alone, but where he was he had no idea. All he could tell was that he was standing in the stone fireplace of what looked like a large, dimly lit wizard's shop. But nothing in here was ever likely to be on a Hogwarts school list. A glass case nearby held a withered hand on a cushion. A blood-stained pack of cards was staring, and a staring glass eye. Evil-looking masks leered down from the walls, and an assortment of human bones lay upon the counter, and rusty spiked instruments hung from the ceiling. Even worse, the dark narrow street Harry could see through the dusty shop window was definitely not Diagon Alley. The sooner he got out of here, the better. Nose still stinging from where he had hit the hearth, Harry made his way swiftly and silently towards the door. But before he'd got halfway towards it, two people appeared on the other side. One of them was the very last person that Harry wanted to meet when he got lost, covered in soot, and was wearing his broken glasses. It was Draco Malfoy. Harry looked quickly around at the spotted black cabinet to his left. He shot inside and pulled the doors, leaving a small crack for him to peer through. Seconds later, a bell clanged and Malfoy stepped into the shop. The man who followed could only be his father. He had the same pale, pointed face and identical cold grey eyes. Mr. Malfoy crossed the shop, looking lazily at the items on display, then rang the bell on the counter before turning to his son and saying, "Touch nothing, Draco." Malfoy, who had reached out for the glass eye, said, "I thought we were going to buy me a present." "I said I would buy you a racing broom," said his father, drumming his fingers on the counter. "What's the good of that if I'm not on the house team?" said Malfoy, looking sulky and bad-tempered. "Harry Potter has a Nimbus 2000 last year. Special permission from Dumbledore so that he could play on Gryffindor. He's not even that good. It's just because he's famous. Famous for having a stupid scar on his forehead."